Alright, welcome back to the Ram Revival. Had a lot of requests to kind of update people on things, and Labor Day weekend here, keeping the ball rolling as best we can. Got some downtime finally from work. And what we've got going on, we need to get the cold air intake on, we need to get the exhaust button up, and we of course need the tune so we can start data logging. Tune, we've actually got the base startup tune. We'll see how that one does. That's why the battery's charging. That's what that hum is in the distance. It's not a fan, so don't complain. It's, basically, if you recall, we kind of showcased this thing ahead of time. And if I take you down here, you're going to see that's our Volant cold air intake. Thought the part number was here. I'll try to remember to link it. We introduced it long ago. But the main thing I had to do is that I've got a gasket underneath this square, and I did that so it would kind of flatten out. But it looks like this little rivet here is going to be like step one. We're essentially going to need to cut in, take the screws out on this thing, and then disassemble it, essentially have the bottom shell, if you will, and put the rivet through there into the fender well, and then we kind of just reverse assemble from there. Obviously, if you're familiar with the intake tube on these second gen Rams, that little cut down right there is going to be what we're concerned with. So, as I take you up here, what we had before, I could not stand. I love the concept of the factory intake. It seems like it was really good. It feeds fresh air from the front grill. It's ducted through the inner fender. The issue was changing the filter was a nightmare because of the setup on the throttle body. It was just a total pain. Maybe two-wheel drive or regular height four-wheel drive is not as big of a deal. It sucked. I hated it. We were running a Spectre cold air intake. Say what you will, it made my life easier because the filter was over here. It was boxed as well. Now in this vicinity here, one of those holes, I can't really remember which one now, is going to get that plastic rivet, and then this, which you can kind of see, this chasm, that is where the factory intake tube buttoned into. It's kind of where your factory, aftermarket Spectre filter sat. It did have a box enclosing it for what it's worth. But this one is going to be plastic. It's going to be insulated from everything, and it will feed air just like the factory, but the filter should be significantly easier for us to get to and contend with. So what we're going to do is just start mocking this thing up. I'll walk you through it as best I can. Well, that's not a cold air intake. It's cardboard with black paint. And the reason for that, I don't really think the factory cleared this, or if they did, it's just heat. I guess it's taking its toll, but you'll see right there, we just have a really crude cleanup job, and just shot some paint over the top of it. That was not the most egregious thing. If I can one-hand this for you. Right back here, kind of behind my fender cover, we've got that. And again, really, really crude. This is going to get covered up. You're not going to see it, but it's against what I know to leave bare exposed metal, and that's what that is. I assume that either having pull in the engine, or more likely the Spectre cold air thing just rode on that. There is a rubber gasket. It wasn't a bad kit, especially for as cheap as it was. But these little things here, this is the difference between you doing work and a shop doing work for you. And so we don't cut corners, we want things done right. So we're going to hit all these little spots. And nothing fancy, but again, a little paint is better than nothing. So quick tape job, and then of course just the cardboard to kind of control overspray. I really do try to clean up these rubber hoses. It doesn't happen. I could probably find some cleaner that would do it, but the number of times I've been over them, including just before filming this, that's just kind of how they are. It's very dusty where I live. Again, truck, it's 01, so we're 22 years in a dusty environment. Tons and tons of heat cycles, elements, all that stuff takes its toll on rubber. But yeah, we'll eventually either replace those or try to clean them up. But right now, too much excitement to spend on that. So we'll just get this paint down. It's 99, so it ought to dry pretty fast. And then we'll proceed on with, I believe, that little hole right there. This one, I'm tapping, I think that's where we're going to utilize the plastic rivet. It's kind of confusing because I haven't had a cold air kit in here in so long. But, I want to say it's that one. We'll see how it turns out. Alright, so again, not a great job, but just something on bare metal seems better than nothing. So what we need to do now is let the paint dry. We don't want to just smear that all around by putting that Volant cold air box in there. And we've got something to pass the time, and it's right here. It is the coolant. I don't have any coolant in this thing right now. Need to fill it up. This is a rare situation when you've got a new motor in the truck. You're not going to have anything in it, right? Drain the block, if you will. Factory capacity, you're looking at 20 quarts. That's 5 gallons. It's a lot of coolant. Typically, as you drain and flush, depending on how good of a job you do, it's going to fluctuate much less than that. But in this instance, it's almost like a virgin build from the ground up type of a thing. So we should go through a lot. Obviously, all we've got to do is twist the cap off, which I've already done, and clean up and get ready to pour. So the coolant of choice is going to be right here. Finally get this out of my floor. And I initially was going to run coolant I had and a bunch of distilled water. You'll note all around the shop, if you ever look around, I've got tons of jugs of distilled water. And over the years, they have just cracked in the summer, cracked in the winter. I don't know if it's like the pressure in the summertime heat. And they don't make gallon jugs of as robust of a material. All it is, I don't open them. They just sit there on the floor, and they either freeze in the winter and crack, or they get hot in the summer and blow. So, yeah, this is 50-50. Typically, like I said, I would have straight antifreeze and straight distilled water and mix them myself. After going through so many countless times of purchasing gallons of water from different retailers and brands and having all of them kind of do the same thing, I said, screw it, we're just going to go this route. So that's what we're going to do. We do have this to add as well, ancient from a parts store. It's just a little something since the truck has sat a while. We're going to do this in hopes that our gasket on the water pump doesn't leak. That's the main goal of this. So anyway, I'm going to get to pouring. I guess no point in you seeing any of that. You should know what to do. But yeah, basically it's going to vary. But in this instance, we'll probably be close to the 20 quart, 5 gallon mark. Alright, so there's a fan blowing. It's probably here in the background. I don't care. It's hot. The battery charger has completed its cycle, so we're home free on that front. But right here, I've got to stress this again. If you have a funnel, you can probably use it for a lot of things. Coolant, fluid, water, funnels, another funnel, oil, transfer, whatever. The main thing, always clean the funnel. Doesn't take long. Keeps you from getting trash or debris, let alone other fluids inside somewhere you don't want them. So the other tip, anytime, I don't care if it's a just regular service interval, if it's brand new stuff, don't just go to town and dump all 6 quarts or 6 jugs or 5 jugs or whatever in there. Go slowly and get maybe half a jug or so in there, kind of let it settle, and see if you've got any leaks, because the last thing you want is to lose tons and tons of new coolant. So as of right now, I've let that sit a little while, and obviously as you fill it up you could run into more issues, but this is quite difficult to one hand. I'm gonna see if I can not drop everything. I don't recommend doing what I do. I recommend doing something a little bit more secure. It's very slippery. There's no handle to hold this jug, but you get the idea. You just simply fill it. Again, we won't waste your time and showcase this. I'm actually just going to waste your time until I pour this, because I don't want to set it down while I've got a good flow going. And after this, we'll have a full gallon in. We'll wait a little while and make sure there's nothing egregious happening underneath the vehicle. It's always smart to sweep the bay beforehand as well. Make sure you know of any existing leaks or spills. That way you can kind of differentiate the two from a distance without having to go down there and run your finger through them. But right there, we've got our first gallon back in the 408. I'm cheap, so I like to set these up on their ends for a little while. Kind of need my second hand to do that. So I'm going to go ahead, I'll rinse and repeat. You got the idea. But again, always, always, could be something you left a drain valve open, you have a hose loose still you forgot about, you got interrupted, a phone call, whatever. Simple little steps can save you a lot of time on a cleanup. So with that said, I'll get this thing checked out, topped up all the way, and we'll get back to the cold air install. Not sure you're going to be able to see that, but basically at this point in time, it's almost full. Cram a little bit more in there. Obviously, first fire is going to suck it down. We'll have to bleed, bubble out the air, everything along those lines. But we've passed enough time. Paint should be dry, so we can get back to the cold air intake. Now, right here, we've got it turned over on its side. And what we're dealing with is, believe it or not, number 3 Phillips screws. Crazy, I know. So, They're a little bit loose already from the factory, but we'll just come in. We got 4 screws, basically 90 degrees on the bolt hole circle. We'll get those out. We'll be able to extract the filter, and then we'll, I guess, have access to get that plastic tree rivet installed. So I'll pull these out. We'll get this in the inner fender well and snap in the rivet. Alright, so interesting note here. These are actually, again, when you see number 3 Phillips, you know it's going to be a pretty beefy screw. These are number 14s. Which essentially you could run quarter-20 stuff, right? They do have a rubber washer under them that's nice, but number 14 by, can't remember now, I think it was 1.25 inches. So one thing that would be nice from Volant, I think it would expedite things in terms for the end user or the installer both, would be if these were just quarter-20 1.25 bolts. You had a hex head. You could run like a little nut setter, zip them in and out a little quicker. But anyway, it is what it is. It gives us a reason to own more number 3 Phillips drivers. And the way this works, it just lifts out as an assembly. So right here, your filter change, like if this was installed in the truck, you've got 4 screws. This would be your filter. I kind of was surprised it didn't have a pre-screen on it, but it is what it is. Got a pretty nice little clamp there, it looks like. And then the Volant logo, so we'll set that down. And this is an inside look at where the magic happens, and one of those holes is actually where we need to get that tree rivet in. So let's get this thing set up in the truck and figure that out. Alright, so this cold air box nests quite nicely. This is what they include, just a little push pin. And we've got to find the spot where that's going to go. The paint did not turn out well in the most egregiously bad bare metal spot, but it is what it is. I'll probably sand it for real and brush fill it sometime, but for now I just want to get this thing together. So there that is, and I don't really think I'm going to have an angle to actually showcase this to you. I do want to highlight, I bring you down right here. If you sort of follow my index finger, that pad, we've used that in the past, and what that is that's going to be where Volant has pre-installed sort of like a rubber bumper. That means that the farther inboard one is where we need to put this. Again, you'll have to reach in through the filter housing, but it is something we'll try to do. That would be the only real downside to this, is I'll have to basically stand up on the wheel or a ladder, which I was having to do anyway. The screws come out pretty easy, but it's just sort of it's kind of a pain to get over there. So anyway, I'm going to get this push pin in, and then we'll take on the next step. Alright, I always try to be transparent and upfront with you because this is a project that I feel like I've walked people through, so if you really wanted to do it and needed guidance, you'd kind of have some basic mechanical skills and really just the desire to do it. I think you can pull it off. And things don't always go perfectly, evidenced by this. As I was sitting there trying to get that rivet in, I thought, I'm going to grab a light and make sure I can kind of see what I'm doing. I thought I heard a faint drop. There was a lot of noise outside, and I was like, I did hear the splitter splatter of fluid draining. And I got under the truck, and there was coolant running down the tubes of the primaries on the headers. And I think, good Lord, is it a freeze plug backed out? Like, what's the deal? It was dynoed, shouldn't be an issue there. So they're like, did I not seat the drain plugs or something? I mean, well, what have I done? And everything there is kind of hard to access because of headers, oil filter, etc. And as I came up top, thinking, well, let me get an aerial view on what's going on because I know I should be able to see it, I happen to see a drop of fluid. And, it's right here at the heater hose area. In fact, I think you really, under the A in Magnum, yeah, you just saw it drop, right? If not, I'm going to hold the camera as still as I can. It's coming out of the frickin' heater hose of all things. So, while that does suck, that's like the best possible news. This is the easiest to get to. It's the cheapest to replace and fix. And what I'm going to do is just go get some hose clamp pliers and try to figure out if that's all. And if it is, that'll be an easy fix. So, yeah, I don't know if we've cracked. I think that was a plastic fitting. Don't hold me to that. I don't know if it's cracked. I don't know if it's something egregious. But we're going to figure it out. But again, as I was just trying to get this push pin in, I was like, man, there is liquid down there. And, diagnosis is currently complete. Well, let's see if we can get it resolved. Alright, so if you look right above the trans dipstick, you'll see some blue shop rags, and you see something gold. That would be the brass fitting that I think I remember being suspect about how thin it was, and I think that is our problem there. So might try to reseat that, and then I'm also going to hunt and see if I've got more. You got to realize, like most of the old cars I mess with, we don't run heaters, we don't run air conditioners, we go fast. And, so unfortunately that's a fitting I may well not have, but that thing, it's brand new, it's brass, but it's not good material, it's not very thick, so I think that's the source of that problem. The leak has stopped. There's nothing else. I've tried to get the residual cleaned up, so I've got that rag plugged in the heater core side just to keep any residual that did transverse that direction from coming back out. This one, as long as it's up, we shouldn't have any issues with. And then you'll note I've got this, and that is a little deburring tool from Gador. The reason I have it, I don't think that fan will be impacting things. As you try to assemble this thing, number one, I had to get out a ton of the filter oil. I didn't want that just draining in the truck. You'll note you've got a center hole and you've got a rear hole. You can kind of see the light shining on it. There's really not a good way to highlight it. There you go. The camera focuses on black, and that's what you're going to see. So if you can imagine a line from here back, right there is the second hole. I don't know why this hole is here. I truly don't. I don't know if it's to fit multiple applications. I don't know if they changed the fender wells for the later second gens versus the first. I really don't know. But what I can tell you is for this truck, 01, we need the rear applicable for us. So this hole, the big one in the middle, just gets skipped. We got to go to this one. However, there was some plastic in there, and I've deburred the outside. Now I'm going to do the inside, and we'll call that good. Try to get that buttoned up, and I'll still be able to get to the heater hose with this, so it's not the end of the world there. Alright, so in my attempts to have that just perfectly lined up with the camera angle there, I realized we could have just had daylight come through. So again, center hole, bottom hole, much easier to see now, especially like that. So this one right here, again, kind of rests down where we've always had stuff. Big hole in the middle we're not going to use, and then this one way closer to the duct side, that's what our push pin will go through. What I cleaned out on the inside is this shard right here, which is pretty big, and honestly the plastic rivet isn't strong enough to overcome that. So we've got that kind of prepped. I'm going to go hunt for some heater fittings, but then this thing will install in no time. Alright, you ready for this? Boom, got lucky. I thought I'd pick some stuff up and maybe picked and went with the brass, even though I was kind of suspect of it, but I don't know that this is any better, but it hasn't leaked because it hasn't had an opportunity, so we're going to try it. But yeah, I'll open this thing up, try to extract that, see what shape the hose is in after it being there, and then just take it down. I did, for what it's worth, attempt to reseat the clamps. It couldn't ever stop leaking. Made it worse at one point, got it back to where it was just dribbling, and we're going to go this route. So a little Dorman 5/8 inch, there's your part number in the upper corner. Probably ordered this in with a host of other things, and I'm glad I did. Alright, if you notice, the gold thing is gone, and that's because it's here. And it came out with very little resistance, which is probably part of the problem. The thing is, if this focuses, which is hard for me to do, they kind of look like they're both real thin, cheap, bad material. One being brass, the other being plastic. But the Dorman has a distinct advantage, and you probably can't tell what it is. Aside from the nice hose stop, that is a good deal. But if I flip her over, this, look how much longer that is. So all that real estate from basically the tip here, there's your first barb. You got some reinforcement ribs here to kind of catch, and then a stop. That's all going to be in one hose. This will be in the other. This midsection here is just kind of exposed, but the difference there, again, if I line that up, it's really kind of close, but you can see if you go by this plastic divider here on the Dorman, we're going to have more real estate for both hose ends to seal, and I think it'll turn out to be a good thing. So the only bright side here is these did amazing at ripping that out. So I will get this seated in the heater side first, and then we'll come over here and do the engine side. That way I have less chance of making a bigger mess than I already have. But should be an upgrade, and we'll just keep in mind if we ever want to upgrade from the plastic to something else, we can do so. Alright, not the easiest thing to see, but in fitting fashion, I had to take the hose clamp off to get to that point, and of course it went flying. And, I do have things on order to help me on that department. Didn't know I was going to need them here, but I just thought it'd be nice to have, and it would have been really nice to have. But anyway, that is on. I've got to go retrieve the hose clamp from underneath the truck and slide that over. It's critical we do that before we put that in place. I know it's tempting to jab that in, think it's fixed. Gotta go get that, get it on, and then slide the hose clamp down on this, put that on, and go to town. Obviously, gear worm clamps, you can avoid that. I prefer spring tension. That's what the factory uses. That's what we're going to stick with. But give me a second to pick up a hose clamp, and we'll have this thing back together. And there you have it. Not as clean of an installed look as we had previously, because you couldn't see any of the fitting, which is one of the things I hate. But you know what? The only thing that's worse than a hose install that doesn't look good is one that leaks. So we're going to go with the lesser of two evils here. I'll gladly take that. Plus, with it being a black plastic fitting, kind of blends in. Like I said, you're probably having a hard time seeing that with the shadows and stuff. So in natural fashion, as I was struggling with the pliers, the hose dropped down and it didn't leak at first, and I thought, cool, must have a low enough coolant level. No, I was wrong. It temporarily had a gushing spring, but we got her picked back up, jammed in, and then dealt with the hose clamp. So I am basically going to wipe this down, including the floor, because I've got to make sure that we don't have a leak. I feel pretty good about this, evidenced by me doing this, trying to get a high spot and a low spot so the coolant's flowing here, and I'm not feeling or seeing anything, which is what we want. But again, I think I'm going to clean this up, and it's gotten pretty late. I'm going to probably go make some pizza, probably then come back out here and get back to the actual cold air intake. But hey, like I said, anything you do similar to this, you're going to run into similar issues. You might have different ones, you might have the same ones, but just kind of walking you through it as we go. So looks like this is resolved. Like I said, mop it up, check for more leaks, take it from there. Alright, went in, made pizza, came back out, had a huge puddle under the truck, and the question is why. Naturally, you come back to what you just replaced, it seemed to be holding, it's dry as a bone. That's fantastic news. And then if you note, down there's a lot for the camera to look at, and if you were here, you'd know what I'm meaning. But right there, if you come up to this tape job, or I guess go to that injector, okay, on right there, they got the two injectors side by side and some masking tape. In the deep valley under the fuel rail mounting brackets, you'll kind of see something that's sort of like a neon green or yellow, okay? That's antifreeze, and that's concerning. And the thing that was more concerning is where it was leaking from, which is between the engine and the transmission. Keep in mind, like I said, I ran inside, cooked a pizza, ate, it's probably gone an hour, and oh man, that was a mosquito right on my thumbnail. But came back, and like I said, saw that, investigated underneath, tried to trace it down, thought maybe it was residual, and I was like, that sure is a lot of residual. My fear was that it was coming from there, and I thought, well, why would this be in the intake valley? And so I trace it up, and there's kind of a spot where I could see a little drop. Again, none of this is, there's just too much for the camera to take in, but right there at the base of the water neck, we have something. Now, I didn't want that stamped steel water neck. I had ordered a nice billet one, but I didn't have it when the engine needed to be dynoed, so we threw the factory style stamped one on. I don't know that that's leaking. What is leaking is whenever I touched, you might have guessed it, the frickin' heater hose. That connection where it jams down into that area with all the action, all the wires, all the cables, everything is in that one area. It jumped quite a bit of fuel. So my thoughts are, if you don't know, on these second gen Rams, aside from having the firewall and the cowl competing, you don't have much access here. Like, there's a lot of real estate, but it's all crammed in the back. That's a dream scenario. You take that fan shroud out, you got all the space in the world. But this engine, in addition to being under the cowl, it's also kind of cantered, if you recall, sort of up at an angle. That would be why the coolant's draining that direction. And I'm hoping that it's all coming from the heater hose still. and that would be the reason that we've got it running down the back of the block and between the transmission. Because if not, if there's a freeze plug that's somehow like popped or is just leaking a little, that's not fun. That's really not fun. So what I thought was going to be an innocent little, hey, let's put some coolant in this thing, it's kind of turned into a problem. But we will get down in there. I tried to orient the clamps the easiest way for me to service them, so it's down in that cavity, and I guess I will see if I can't reposition it, maybe grab it better. Who knows, maybe it's another trash brass fitting, brand new stuff that's worse than your 20-year-old OEM pieces, but we shall see. Got some text I gotta check, but I'm hoping that is the entire source of the problem. I really regret not purchasing the long reach hose clamps. I didn't know I'd need them for this. And I also regret not having pig mat here because I'm going through a lot of shop towels and socks. So I will hit that stupid little guy right there and see what happens. Alright, so this has turned into even more of a nightmare. The hose clamp doesn't really want to go down as low as it should go, in my opinion. And we've kind of had to, I'm trying to remember what I did to install it. Obviously some of that stuff wouldn't have been there. I kind of think we used the Vihas, but the little snap-on long nose, they've what I've been trying to use, and they reach and they bend. It's just the hose I don't think is very good quality. I have pulled out, if you look down there, that thing with the masking tape on it, the 90-degree bend pointed down. Let me just zoom in on it for you. That's the factory hose minus the clamps, right? And what I'm thinking about doing, I kind of want to use the hose we've got on there that we braided. When I pull that off, it's like a gusher, obviously, because this spot is higher than that spot, and we currently have enough coolant in there to make this a low spot, which then has a point of least resistance, and it will jump out like a volcano. So luckily, again, stockpile of stuff that I stock was 5/8 heater hose, and I've got my little cutters here. I'm kind of thinking if I cut just enough to go taller than this, and something that I could maybe like tuck in over there where it wouldn't spew out, I could rip this braided hose off, jab that on as quick as I can. I mean, at this point in time, we've already got a mess, so it's not like it's the end of the world, but as soon as that hose breaks with that fitting, it's spewing. So I'm kind of wondering, I don't really remember what that fitting looked like, but I'm kind of thinking that was a problem, or it could be the source of the problem, just like our brass fitting sitting there was a problem. So yeah, I don't want to rob. Got my factory intake I could rob fittings off of. I don't want to do that. Those are old, they're corroded. I don't want to introduce that into a new cooling system. So kind of thinking I might just lop some of this off, kind of as a surrogate, where it's just a high point and it won't allow the fluid to escape. And then we try to kind of caress that clamp. Or I've gone in, I believe this was a 3/4 inch. It's not great quality at all, but I've got my nut driver there. So we'll see. I don't think it's leaking right now, but I'm afraid as soon as I twist that hose and put it back on the plastic barb to couple to the heater core, we got a problem. You see, this is the Lord's way of telling you you don't need a heater or an air conditioner. You just need to get in your truck and enjoy it, and we wouldn't have any of these problems right now. So nonetheless, though, I guess we'll try to make do with the accessories we've been blessed with. So we'll see how it goes, but that's current thoughts are just hope it doesn't leak, like clean it up, go in for the night, come back out, see if there's a puddle, and other option is cut this, have like a vent tube, if you will, and make it taller than the radiator. So we'll see. Alright, so here we are. It's just about midnight. We have strung out a ton of stuff. Koken, we've got the Napros, we've got the Astro. Coming in over here, you're gonna see a hodgepodge of stuff, right? Napros nearly got it. We had our 5/16 from Capri over here. Again, it's a shame a lot of ratchet and wrench sets start at 3/8. We had the Matco. I was hoping the Matco could redeem itself. Still hasn't done that. This KTC right here, I feel like if this was a 12 point, might have been able to make it happen. This is a low profile proto. That thing got in there, just couldn't do anything. It's actually lower than that quarter drive Koken. Again, if I had 12 point in quarter drive, I might have been able to make some headway. But what I have stuck in here, it's a bare metal handle. If you see the green dot, it is a Stahlwille. And we use that sucker. I've got an 8mm on there, kind of interchanges with the 5/16. It's 12 points. There's basically no space. I don't really like where that thing is positioned currently, but with the thin handle of that, I was able to get in around the fuel rail. If you come this way, you know, things look way better from up here, but you got to realize I'm draped over a fender. Your back gives out, you have stuff jabbing in your rib cage. It's not fun. But that boss right there, where you have the intake manifold bolt, that protrusion, right, the round part where it just kind of goes away from the casting like that, that creates a lot of problems because I wanted that to angle towards injector right there and underneath the top of the fuel rail bolt. Good luck fitting anything. We have a lot of low clearance stuff, and the issue is, you're like, well, hey, you know, spin it with a wrench. Okay, well, the Deburring little 5/16 there is 12 point box, and here's the problem. That's like a really good wrench, a tight fitting wrench. You kind of need that like Pittsburgh play, this type of a thing. And yeah, this is no small feat here. Now, the cool thing is, I did, right here, I cut the surrogate piece of hose. I should have filmed that because people probably want to see those NWS hose cutters. They do amazing, I'm going to tell you right now. But here's the deal. As I pulled that off, or I guess the last time we jostled it, must have got to the magic point. That thing is literally at the very top of the brass fitting that we've shoved this heater hose on. So that's why it's not just puking fuel right here. It's literally reached a point of equilibrium. If I jostled the truck back and forth, we'd slosh a little bit out. What I'm going to do is painstakingly sop up the entire intake manifold valley, which is ridiculously difficult to get to. I'm going to clean up under the truck, wipe away all the drips that I can find. I'm sure there's like residual on the back of the blocks that'll just kind of seep out over time. But I want to do that so I can put more coolant in it and see if this thing is not going to leak. I just gave up on the spring steel clamp. There it is. I gave up on that, the constant tension one. Namely because the way the thermostat is with the CTS, there's nowhere to go. And it's in the way of one thing or another, and I just thought, you know what, let's just get the gear worm on there, see what she's going to do. That allowed me to lower it. That was really my point of contention. I wanted it as low as possible based on the leak, and we're going to see. It very well could still leak. Maybe we'll revisit it here in a little bit, but yeah, shout out to the Stahlwille coming through in the clutch. And it was nice having options. Typically I would have had, like back just a couple years ago, I would have had Craftsman sockets, and that was my only option. So yeah, we'll go to town here, and again, my apologies for the fan. It's like 95 in here still, and I just don't care at this point in time. Alright, midnight update for you, as it is very hot out here. We have fixed this. Alright, the heater hose, we fixed that leak. As best I can tell anyway. There's not a good way to get down there really, but if you look at the bolt on the gear worm clamp is over the top of our thermostat housing, right? The water neck, whatever you want to call it. I mentioned that because if we go here, do you see it right there above my finger? I know my finger's blurry, I know that's blurry, but if I focus, right, you should be able to tell right in that area, the extra glisten, the two dots that you're looking at in the middle of the screen, that's a small stream of coolant. And where it's coming from is the water neck. That's right, so that's leaking as well. I kind of thought it was, but I knew that the bigger issue was the heater hose, and my thoughts were, well, the heater hose could have flooded one of the times I picked it up the water neck, and it could just be residual. I've cleaned that up as good as I can multiple times now, and I've determined that it's just constantly then coming from between the aluminum intake manifold and what? Our stamped steel water neck. And this is before we've had heat cycles in this thing, so typically I'm a big believer in aluminum and aluminum. They seal the best. Steel and steel, they seal the best. So I think somewhere I have a water neck that's billet aluminum because it came well after the build because it was like back ordered. The issue is now I don't remember if it's the full length one or if it's a short one. If it's a short one, I don't know that the hose goes there. It might. The biggest problem is that is like one of the most restricted areas to get to. That and of course the back of the block. Anything like from the two primaries here back on both sides and then that is a nightmare. And we're gonna have to deal with that. And I'm really thirsty, dripping sweat, and I've got a lot to clean up because we had a very, very tight quarters there to turn that hose clamp. So I am going to clean up, hunt for a billet water neck. If I don't have a tall one, which I don't remember what Hughes did, it's been that long, like I don't know, maybe they just made a short one. I've got lots of really trick big block stuff, but I don't have much magnum stuff, so we will see. I might have another one. I think this was Motorad, if I remember correctly. I've got the factory one. I don't know. I'll see, maybe look into cleaning it up, who knows, but pretty sure that's what's happening here. Now, I think before we would have had that plus the heater hose, with the heater hose leak being more egregious. So, yeah. Belt, alternator, compressor, all kinds of stuff's got to come out of the way. This really sucks, and it's not what I had in mind for this weekend here. So I'm gonna clean up, put some rags down there. I don't know that I'll clean the floor up because I don't know how much that's gonna sieve out until it again hits a point of equilibrium. Ooh, nut driver was about to fall there, but we'll just take it in stride, I suppose. So like I said, I did see the fluid there, but at the time, my thoughts were like, oh, well, that's probably just runoff, some casted that way from the heater hose. And it very well could have, but it's also leaking from the water neck. So, good times, good times. We'll jump on that. I don't know, we may delay the cold air intake and just start over. That's what I totally intended to do here. I was just going to dump coolant in and then put the cold air intake on, and clearly that hasn't happened. So lots of downtime in between these things off camera. So I'll clean up a little bit, get some rags knocked down, and decide what I want to do. Kind of want to get some hose clamp pliers and a mini fridge with water bottles, but that can't happen at midnight, so we'll figure it out and we will be back. Alright, so bear with me here. I'm kind of dehydrated. It's really hot in here, and I've just been waiting on this thing to drain. And you turn the petcock a little too far and it just gushes out, and there's a sweet spot where it'll actually go through a drain hose and make a nice little organized draining. That's what I've had to been waiting on, so I've been cleaning a lot, doing some other things. And I finally was like, screw it, I've got to get a drink. And I wanted to see where I was, and if you'll note here, I've ripped the hose off. The hose is off, and if I take you over here, you can see the thermostat. The reason you can see the thermostat, there's no standing coolant. That's what we wanted. I'm going to let it drain a little bit more before I rip that off, but I think you can see standing coolant there. That would be for me earlier, doing the same thing, trying to get the hose off. And I am thinking we're just going to RTV this thing. This is Fill Pro that's on there. I've got a lot of paper gaskets for a Magnum. I think I have one decent gasket from Mahle. And if the Fill Pro leaked, I think we'll just RTV it. And if you're curious what the sock is for, that's so I don't ingrain the Mopar and Pinistar. Every time, I'm on the first rung of my stepladder, when I go to rung 2, that's where I brace myself. These are terrible working conditions. Again, 2-wheel drive, maybe it's a little easier, but I'm gonna try to leave. I have taken that bracket off. You can see the manifold boss there, and where you'd have the AC lines coming in right there. That bracket is over there, and I did take the ground lug off of the alternator. I've left everything else connected. Again, in order to swivel everything, we'd have to just adjust the tensioner, get the belt off, go to town. We might have to do that, but for the sake of me just wanting this done, we're going to do this. The thing is, even if I swivel, let's just say I take it all down, unless I come in and take the radiator off, the fan shroud off, the fan off, and all the accessories off the front, there's not a good place to stand. I could stand there, again, the fan shroud, right? Like we did when we pulled the engine. That was great. It would work really good for this. But that's the only problem. It's just a slight little trickle coming from this back edge. The water neck is oriented correctly. It just sucks. So I'm going to let it go like another minute or two just to give myself a good chance. I'm pretty sure it would be at a sufficient level. But I'm going to go get some water, try to cool off a little, and then we'll probably be back out here and we'll take that off. I'm thinking the best course of action is going to be to RTV the water neck and do our best to stab it down. It might be smart to have like half 13 rod or something to sort of locate it, and we'll hope that that seals, because if it doesn't, it's going to suck. So I think what I'll probably do is, if I can get my funnel in there around all those cables, I'll probably just let that set up however long it has to and then fill directly at the water neck. For the sole point of being, I want fluid there to see if it's going to leak or not. And that's what I want to accomplish. So, once again, I'm going to shut off the drain valve, get inside, get some water, and then we'll come back out here, get this taken care of. I do have this set up though. Been using the Koken, but where is it? Right here. If you're doing this on your truck, okay, or your Grand Cherokee or Durango or whatever it might be, Dakota, this right here, it's I think the 10-inch locking extension from Koken. That's important because if you try to use a wobble fix, your socket's probably going to come off. They're great otherwise, but right here I've got the 1/2-inch nut grip socket on there. These two coupled together is kind of like a bulletproof attack point for that. In the past, these locking extensions are really new. The nut grips 3/8 drive that I have here are relatively new as well, so didn't have this in the past. This is awesome. You don't have to use grease or tape or anything crazy or magnetic extensions that may or may not work. They wouldn't in my case because I use stainless bolts. So the nut grip and the locking extension should foolproof this and make it significantly easier. So very excited there. 1/2-inch for that. The ground lug stud, that's what that icon 13mm is out for. The top bolts for the stud with that brace, and then over here going into the top of the accessory bracket, 9/16 14mm. It's gonna interchange pretty much. 14 might be a little tighter. Use what you've got. So 9/16 and half, or 13 and 14, or any combination thereof should get you to this point, should you be in this shape. The reason I don't make this like a standalone, let's replace the leaking water neck, is because it's going to be rare that everyone's going to have aftermarket intake, so on and so forth. So it sort of defeats the purpose. In stock, like repair videos, you kind of need it stock, so we shall see. But if you see this and you're putting an air gap on your Magnum, I would 100% RTV that little thing. And right here, I did last night before I went in, I found my billet one. Here's the issue. This is sort of designed for, hey, I just pulled this 5.9 Magnum out of a wrecked Ram, and I'm going to stab it in my 72 Dart. Okay, and that water neck would work great for that. It's going to look good, should seal well, aluminum on aluminum. No one makes the tall water neck there. I think there's a slight canter to it as well, trying to keep things to clear. Don't hold me to that, but you know, there's that front facing tab towards the radiator. The back side doesn't have the tab. A lot of people get annoyed by that. I think that's there for the slight rake that the water neck has, but anyway, that's the tools you need to basically tear it back down if you've forgotten. I got sweat in my eyes, I'm dripping sweat, I'm thirsty, I'm gonna get inside, and hopefully we can RTV that stupid water neck. Alright, so that is incredibly tight. You see the Koken going down with that locking extension. It's cantered back, the flex head pulls it that way, but it does clear, which is great news, just barely. The hose clamp has to come off in order for either one of those to happen. It's just an insanely tight area with everything in place, but I do think I'll be able to get this out. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that, see if we can't get some RTV on it. Alright, so worked beautifully with the locking extension and the nut grip. You can see the second bolt there. Take you back over here without falling off of the stool. just caught some air there on two legs. Things are looking mint as they should right there. Of course, we don't have any RTV, any mess to contend with. The only thing is, if you look down, which it's really hard for me to get this square for you because of the obstructions, you can see that it's not really set up beautifully, right? Your accessory bracket kind of hangs over there, and that creates an issue. So I think what we'll do is just clean up the water neck. What I've got going, probably should have filmed this, but 1/4 and 3/8. We got locking and non-locking, but they're both holding down onto the bolts for us. Worked really well. I use that little V-Hoff for the sort of orients my flat washers. I can put them on there, hold it, put the thin end of the driver into the hole, drop the flat, get it in roughly the right position. Obviously, the nut grip's not going to hold the flat washer for us, so that kind of takes care of that. It's terms of torque, it's going to be 17 foot-pounds. Now, do the math on that. That's 204 inch-pounds. How do we know? 12 times 12 is 144. 12 to 17 is 5. 5 times 12 is 60. 60 and 144, 204. So, got the little Capri sitting somewhere. And we'll torque that down. We'll have to go 1/4 drive. That's the only inch-pound torque wrench I've got. So we'll get that sucker torqued, and then I think I'm just going to dump coolant in there and see if it holds. So the great thing here, no RTV, no downtime, nothing I have to wait on. If it leaks, it leaks, and we're no better off or worse than we were. If it doesn't leak, we can continue on, and that's kind of the goal. So give me some time. I'll torque this down, and we'll see how it does. Can't tell, that's the valve cover ingrained into my skin. But we have the new thermostat gasket torqued down, 204 inch-pounds, and we are ready to just move this funnel to that water neck and go to town. So the end goal is to get water standing in the neck, and if it does that, I'm happy. And that means it's not leaking. If it stands there and it leaks out, I'm not happy, and that means we're gonna probably try to order a Fill Pro, see if that'll do it, and then if not, we'll go to RTV land. So anyway, it's really hot because I've got the fan kind of drying out the puddles from last night, so I'm gonna go ahead and start filling this thing up, see if we get any leaks. Alright, so this is what I drained, slowly drained from our radiator. And if you coupled in everything that I've sopped up on the intake valley, and of course what's in my pan down below from leaking last night, from the heater hose and then the thermostat, I would say we probably 4 quarts or so, maybe 3.5. But that's basically where we needed to be to have the coolant level at a point where the thermostat and the gasket for the water neck are totally serviceable. So now you can see my funnel, all this is going back in there, and hopefully not into the valley pan. So we want to pour slowly, pull the funnel, kind of see where we're at. I can't film it, just have 2 hands, but I will let you know how it goes. Hopefully we have good news.